All right, today's lesson is frequency tables and grouped data. So yesterday we also did, or last day we did frequency tables. We're going to do them again, except the difference is we got to talk about grouped data. So what's the goal? I can create a tally, frequency table, and histogram. More worried about the tally and frequency table today. Histogram, that skill's not going to change for us. So I want you to be able to do a tally and a frequency table for grouped data. So again, we have a couple of definitions here. So let's do it one at a time here so you can follow through. So let's just focus on range. What does range mean? Range is the distance from the biggest piece of data to the smallest. So we're just going to use the formula. Range equals, and we'll keep it simple, big minus small. Okay, so there is simplified formula for you to calculate range. All right. So what is grouped data? So that is the new twist today. Let's say, like yesterday, we had 10 different outcomes. Okay, so we were talking about Jess, how many shots she gets in a ringette game. So she had from 0 to 10. That wasn't too bad. That was still a lot of histogram to build, but it wasn't too bad. What happens if we get into a 0 to 100 situation? Do you want to be creating a histogram or a bar graph that has 100 bars on it? So if you created the histogram, you get 100 bars. It's time consuming. No one wants to make a graph this big. Even on computer, it's a challenge. So what we do is we break the data into intervals. Okay, so we break it into intervals. So what is an interval? Well, I'm going to demonstrate it on the next slide, but here are the rules. The rules for creating intervals. All right, the first rule, and you're going to say some of them kind of make sense. The first rule here is each piece of data must have an interval to be placed. Okay, so that means that I should be able to find a home for every piece of data we have. Each interval must be equal in size. Okay, you can't change the size of the intervals. If you're going to have groups of 5, you have to have groups of 5 all the time. If you want groups of 10, go with groups of 10. But you cannot go 5, 3, 10. It's all got to be the same. And there's can't be any overlap in the interval. Okay, so you can't have overlap in the interval. So for example, if I say from 10 to 20 and then 20 to 30, where would 20 go? Because 20 is here and it's here. So it occurs in 2 intervals. So that's what we don't want to run into. Okay, so those are the 3 basic rules. Let's take a look at the example here that I've got set up. So, using the data given, what's the range of the data? So we have to look for the biggest and smallest number. So when I go scanning through, I see a 122. So I'm going to look for the smallest first. So something to beat 122, and scan. Oh, I got a 120. So that 122 is no longer the smallest. So 120 is my smallest. So remember, range. Oops, having trouble spelling today. Range is equal to big minus small. So I've got the 120. I know the small. Now for the big one. Where is my biggest piece of data? So 180. I got a 186. Oops. Got a 192. Is anything going to beat 192? Scanning. Oh, I got a 193. And it looks to be the winner. So 193. So 193, take away 120, so you can use the calculator for that. 3, 7, so 73 is the range. So that means from my smallest piece of data to my biggest, it's a range of 73. All right. If the data is to be split into 8 classes or 8 intervals, so just put it there. It also means intervals. Okay, it's not written very neat. So intervals. What is the width of each class. Okay, so this is how you do it. You take range, divided by number of intervals. So I know my range is 73, and I'm going to divide it by 8. And when I perform that operation, I get an answer of 9.1. So that's equal to 9.1. Now, do I want to use 9.1? I definitely don't want to use decimals. Okay, absolute suicide if you're going to use decimals, people. So please don't use decimals when you do your range or your intervals. So what I would do here, because the answer is 9.1, I'm going to pick a nice number to work with. You could pick 9, nothing wrong with that, but what's easier, counting by 9s or counting by 10s? So round up to the nicest. I'm going to put it in quotations. It's up to you which is the nicest number. I don't even know if nicest is a word. So what would I use here? I'm going to use 10 because going by 10s is a lot easier. All right, so I took the range, I divided by how many intervals I wanted, excuse me, and I got 9.1. You have to round up, so instead of going 9.1, I'm going to go by 10s. So, in C part, we want to create a frequency table. So the frequency table, similar to what we did the other day, so we're going to have, instead of shots in this case, we're going to have interval as the title. So interval. We're going to have total. Sorry, frequency is the next one. Don't want to mess you up. So it's the same chart as yesterday. Frequency and then total. The difference is your intervals. So I'm going to go by 10s, and I'm going to start with the smallest number. So I'm going to start with 120. And I'm going to go by 10s, and you got to be careful here. So 120 is 1, 121, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, 28, 29. So from 120 to 129, okay, is my first interval. The next one would be 130 to 139. The nice thing when you go by 5s or 10s or 4s, you can pick whatever you want, patterns emerge, so it makes it pretty quick then to finish the rest of your pattern. So 150 to 159, 160 to 169, 170 to 179, 180 to 189, 190 to 199. So here, how do I know I did it right? If I look at this in here, okay, how many intervals do I have? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. That's what they wanted. They wanted me to split it into 8 classes. So that's good. What's my smallest piece of data? 120. 120 is my first part of my interval. The biggest, 193, is less than 199, so I'm all ready to go. All right, so now when you do your frequency, you need to figure out how many are in that particular interval. So now, instead of finding that exact value, you're now calculating or tabulating how often it happened. So for example, 136 is the first one. It would fall into the 130 to 139 range. So now running through, 122, 181 would be there, 155 is there, 157 is in there. So you can see that it's got to fall into a particular interval. So I'm going to pause the video so you don't have to go through watching me sort and make fun of me then, and then I'll return once I have the frequency table finished. All right, hopefully I didn't keep you waiting too long. So here we got my frequency tables done. So I went and crossed off all the data, did my frequency chart here, found where all the data fell, and then I went through and added up my tallies to figure out how much goes into each one, or how much was in each one. Now what I'm going to do, I'm going to shrink that down, because D part is draw a histogram. So what's different from the histogram you drew yesterday? And the answer is not much. The only thing that's different is our bottom axes, and I'll show you the why there. So again, if I draw my axes, so across the bottom is going to be our interval, and again, it's always frequency up the y-axis here. So our frequency, my intervals now. So this is where it'll be a little bit more, you got to turn the page now. So for example, I'm going to have, let's do it this way, this is probably the easier way, 120 to 129, 130 to 139, 140 to 149, 150 to 159. So at the bottom now, your intervals that you just wrote in your frequency table get transferred to the bottom, just as I'm doing here. 179, 180 to 189, and then one last interval, 190 to 199. Okay, so now I'm looking at which one occurred the most often. So I definitely have to go up to 9. So I think I'll go up by 2s on my scale here. You can really pick whatever you want. So 2, 4, 6, 8, 10. So coloring in my blocks. I'll probably shrink that, move it over here. So again, so 3, I'll color in later. 3 for the next one. 1, 9. So this one's got to go up to 9. Again, you'll have nice graph paper to do this on. 3, 5. So that's going to be about there. 180 to 189, and 9 again. And then finishes with a 3. So there we go. So there's our histogram. So the histogram is the exact same process. The only thing that's changed again is those intervals. So you need to be able to, and that's the whole focus really of today's lesson, is being able to come up with these intervals. All right, so the intervals is the difference here, and this is how you create it right here. Okay, you take your range, divide it by how many intervals you want, and round up to the nearest, nicest number. So finishing this question off, I got C and D done. Which class had the most data? So there's actually 2. There'd be 150 to 159 and 180 to 189. So those are the 2 intervals. How many pieces of data were 170 or greater? So if that's the case, 170, here's the 170 right here. So we would have to add up those 3 bars or those 3 totals. So 5, 9, and 3. So 12, so we end up with 17. So therefore, 17 pieces of data were 170 or greater. All right. That's it. So that gives you a rundown on how to do it. So there's only one change today, only one difference from what you're doing the previous day, and it's creating those intervals. All right, so that's what your major focus is dealing with those today. If you have any further questions, let me know in the one-on-one session.